Ah, Christmas. What a truly wonderful time of year. A time to relax and reflect upon all that has happened throughout the year. A time to cherish the ones around you and truly thank them for what they've done for you. But most importantly, it's a time to get lots and lots of presents! And what better to get as presents than a bunch of highly overpriced art books? And yes, before you ask, this will be this year's Christmas special. Ever since I was little, I've always had an interest in art. I mean, obviously. But more specifically, I've always had a very strong interest in concept art. I don't know if it's just because I'm a slight bit of an art kid, or if I just have a touch of the tism, but I just find it so interesting to learn about how a product got made, and just the progression of things in general. I think that's actually the main reason why I really like art. The process of crafting and creating something is just super cool to me. So of course, when little 5-year-old me found out I could get a massive book full of concept art, I was amazed. I mean, up to this point, I was used to like $2 coloring books that were stuffed to the brim with stolen images. I mean, this was completely revolutionary to me. And it only took me 8 years to get my first one. Yeah, believe it or not, 5-year-old me didn't really have $50 to spend on an art book. And if I did have money, I'd probably just spend it on a bunch of stuffed animals. I had a very, very worrying problem as a kid. So on Christmas Day of 2019, the Super Mario Odyssey art book was mine. Thank you, Mom and Dad. Ever since then, I've steadily been building up my collection of art books, with my most recent addition being this super sick Cuphead book. So with Christmas right around the corner, what better time to take a look at these? And hey, maybe if you really like one of them, you can pester your parents to get it for you for Christmas, just like I did. I swear to God, the only reason my parents got me the Mario Odyssey art book was to shut me the hell up. I see no better one to start off with than the first one I ever received, The Art of Super Mario Odyssey. This thing was just perfect for me as a kid. I was still super obsessed with Mario Odyssey, and still kinda am to an extent, and I was really getting into art. Just from the cover alone, this thing entices you. From the awesome render of Cappy and Mario up front and center, to the dozens of concept sketches filling the background. This thing is just downright beautiful. However, enough about the outside. Let's crack this bad boy open. The first thing you're going to notice when flipping through this book is just how many concepts and ideas they had about this game. I mean, they have a whole page dedicated to optional costumes that didn't even make it into the final release. On top of that, they have a bunch of renders of Mario that you've never seen before. From what I've come to understand, most of these renders were used to pitch the game to Nintendo and show them what the development team was hoping for out of this game. However, they were also used to show the true capabilities of the Nintendo Switch and show that they could add great detail to these beloved characters. This is most apparent with the addition of stitching in Mario's overalls, as well as the individual hairs on his mustache. This all comes together to create an extremely polished and charming character design. However, my absolute favorite thing in this book are all the different development sketches made all the way back in 2013, right when this game began development. We see a bunch of these throughout the book, and really get to see the creative process behind the creation of this game. A really cool example of this are the numerous designs for the different kingdoms we see throughout the game. Just by looking at these sketches, you can easily tell how much time and attention was put into every part of these worlds, from the beginning of them being designed like Mario 64 levels, all the way to the large spanning kingdoms that we know them as today. You can also see this by looking at the numerous early cutscene storyboards for this game. For those who don't know, a storyboard is basically just a rough layout on how a cutscene will take place, and they're super freaking cool. You can really see how the thought behind these cutscenes took place and the different comments they had about them. I mean, that's at least what I'm assuming this Japanese text is. Believe it or not, I don't really read Japan. However, despite all of this, my absolute favorite part of this book has to be this piece of art. I mean, it's just amazing. It's fully able to encapsulate the vibe of the game. I also just love the way it's set up, with everything forming around this planet-like structure. This piece actually reminds me of this Mario comic I had as a kid, and by looking at it, yeah, they do have kind of similar styles. But I think I've talked about this for far too long, so it's time to move on to our next book. Now I know, I'm kind of breaking my rules here, but come on, this thing is way too cool not to include in the video. It also has a bunch of renders spanning the entire series, so I think I can count on it. Just like the name suggests, this is an encyclopedia spanning the entire Mario series, going from the original Super Mario Bros. Game all the way to the most recent game at the time of the book's release, Super Mario 3D World. And it's just absolutely amazing. Just like the Mario Odyssey art book, we get to see some of the behind-the-scenes stuff on how all these games came to fruition. However, unlike that art book, instead of seeing a bunch of concept sketches and ideas, we get to read about how the development teams came up with the concepts behind these games, and just the thought process on how they were all implemented in. To me, this is just super cool. Yeah, we don't get to see a bunch of concept art, which is sorely missed, but because of this, we get a way more in-depth look on how these games were created. However, this doesn't mean that there isn't art within this book. Instead of concept art, we get to see a bunch of renders and promotional artwork used for each game, which, in my opinion, was just the right way to do this kind of book. With it being about the history of the Mario series, it makes complete sense for them to use official, polished renders from these games. Some of my favorites has to be these ones from Mario Galaxy, especially the ones of the planets, the super cool stuff from 3D World, and these really awesome renders from Mario Sunshine. However, despite all this, my absolute favorite part of this book has to be these few pages at the beginning, dedicated to a bunch of the Katabe art from the series. I've always loved these depictions of the Mario cast, and I'm really happy that Nintendo brought this style back and is implementing it back into their games, even though most of the time it's just for these stupid stickers in photo mode. Please, for the love of God, Nintendo, make a 2D Mario game with this style. I would pay you an absurd amount of money for it. However, I think I've rambled enough about the Mario series as a whole, so I think we should move on to our next book. Moving on from that, here we have our next book, Angry Birds, Hatching the Universe. Before we crack this bad boy open and see what's inside, I just have to talk about this absolutely amazing cover for a minute. This thing is truly a work of art, and I really love how everything is centralized around this planet-like thingy. I also really love the style of it, and it actually kind of reminds me of the original Angry Birds commercial. God, this thing was needlessly creepy. Anyway, enough of me rambling about old creepy commercials. Let's see what this thing has in store. Right off the bat, you can clearly tell just how in-depth this thing is, judging by the mile-long paragraphs throughout the entire book. And going through the book throughout this video, I'm 100% confident in saying that this is the absolute most in-depth book in this entire video. Just like the Mario Encyclopedia, this thing is mainly focused on the creation and creative process behind the entire Angry Birds series. However, unlike the Mario Encyclopedia, this thing goes way more in depth about the creation of these games, where the Mario Encyclopedia, in my opinion, only really kind of scratched the surface on the creation of this series. Also, unlike the Mario Encyclopedia, this thing is stuffed to the brim with concept art. From character sketches all the way to crudely drawn storyboards, this book is chock full of concept stuff from the series. And not only that, this book also houses a bunch of promotional and physical goods from the series. Within the book, there are these certain pages that have little folder type thingies attached to them, and inside of these folders are a bunch of little goodies relating to the series. There are these postcards, a foldable cube thingy, a super cool sticker sheet, these really freaky pieces of a bunch of the birds from the series, and a whole lot more. However, I think I've rambled enough about the slightly agitated birds, so I think we should move on to our next book. Here I have The Art of Rick and Morty Volume 2, which mostly covers things from the second season of the show. And no, before you ask, I don't have the first volume in this series, mainly because it was like $70 on Amazon, and I don't really feel like spending $70 on a book. At least not yet. Similarly to the Mario Encyclopedia, this book mainly consists of renders and images of the characters from the show. However, I think this way of doing things works way better for a TV show rather than a game series. With a game, you can simply just decompile everything and look at the models within the files. But with a TV show, it's just not that easy. So with having a book dedicated to everything that you see throughout the second season of the show, it's just an absolutely amazing idea. However, this doesn't mean that there isn't concept art throughout this book. Even though most of it just consists of background and character stills, there are still a few pages that are dedicated for a specific part of the show or just characters from the show in general. The best example of this is on page 21, which is filled to the brim with concept sketches for Pickle Rick. And comparing it to the final design on page 20, you can just tell how much time and effort it took to perfect this design. On top of this, there are also a few storyboard sketches littered throughout the book, kind of like the ones we saw in the Super Mario Odyssey art book. Just like those concept sketches, these really help to show just the creative process behind the show and everything that helps bring it to life. Moving on from that, here we have the absolutely legendary Arts and Artifacts, a collection of concept art and character models spanning the entire Legend of Zelda series. And holy shit, this thing is just amazing! I'm not even a massive Zelda fan, and even I can admit that this is one of the absolute finest art books in my collection. And by just looking at the cover, you can tell how much love and effort was put in this release. With the gold embroidered bird thingy encasing the Triforce in the middle, to the etchings in the corner kind of looking like an old Egyptian scribe, this cover is just absolutely stunning. However, getting away from the cover, let's see what this book actually has in store. Just like many other of the books that we've looked at so far in this video, this book consists of concept art throughout the entire Legend of Zelda series, showing the games in the order that they were released in. Just by skimming through this thing, you can clearly see the absolute quality of the sketches and designs within the book, which, in my opinion, really helped to show the thought process and creation behind all these different characters and places. Take, for example, my favorite page in this book. By looking at this page, you can see the thought process behind the developers when they were choosing the unique look for Link in this game, and how they ultimately came to the final design in Twilight Princess. On top of all these concept sketches and designs, the book also provides us with a few glances at the different models that we've seen throughout the series. Take for example this page about Triforce Heroes. It fully shows off a bunch of Link's different models and outfits in this game, which in my opinion is just a super cool idea. However, if you read through this book, you'll come to notice that this book is severely lacking in content about one of the most important games in the entire Zelda series. A little while after the release of Arts and Artifacts, Nintendo released this, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Creating a Champion. Just as the name suggests, this book takes a very in-depth look into the creation of Breath of the Wild. And holy shit, this thing has to take the cake for the most in-depth book that we've looked at so far in this video. This book not only takes a very in-depth look at the creations of the characters and environments in the game, but also the way the designers implemented them and how they even came up with them in the first place. One of the best examples of this is on a page where they're talking about Link's new design and all of the different weapons that he can use throughout the game. As you can see, they are showing a few of the different weapons that you can get in the game by using amiibos, and how they adapted these already pre-existing weapons into the Breath of the Wild style. This is super cool in my opinion, and I really like how they recognize how big of a deal this is to veteran Zelda fans. On top of this, there is a little note from one of the developers in the corner, where he talks about his methods of designing these returning weapons, and how he had to keep in mind how they would work in the newly formed Breath of the Wild world. Just like the concept art, I think this is a really cool inclusion to the book for anyone who's even a little bit interested in game design. On top of both the environmental and character designs, the book also shows concepts of the different designs of the champions that we see throughout the game. I'm really happy they include this throughout the book, given the fact that these are probably the best parts about the game. However, I think I've rambled enough about the wonderful, magical, and awesome world of Zelda, so I think it's time to get into our final book of the video. The final book we have to look at in this video is The Art of Cuphead. And what an absolute wonderful idea it was to create an art book for this game. With a game as heavily focused on its visual style as Cuphead, this is by far the most warranted book in this video. Now, for the uninitiated, Cuphead is a run-and-gun shooter created by Studio MDHR back in 2017, and takes very heavy influence from the old 1920s and 30s cartoons. They went so far with this visual style that they even animated most of the game through traditional hand-drawn animation, and then later scanned it onto a computer so it could be later implemented into the game. And flipping through this book, you can 100% tell how much effort and care they put into this visual style. Within the book itself, we get to see plenty of concept art, from old concepts of Cuphead and Mugman from all the way back during the game's conception, to the different animation frames used throughout the game itself. This book is just chock full of the amazing stuff used to create this game. However, my absolute favorite part of this book has to be all the different concepts, designs, and sketches of the devil. This guy was by far my favorite fight in the game, and I'm really glad that they included him in this book. From the old jester-like design he used to have, all the way to the new devilish one that he has now. I'm just really happy I get to see how this guy was created. On top of all the concept designs of the different characters, this book also provides us with numerous pages dedicated to the different backgrounds seen throughout the game. I'm so glad that they include this in the book, because during normal gameplay you don't really get a good chance to look at these. Mainly because you're fighting for your life against an army of flowers. By looking at these, you can clearly tell how much time and effort they put into every little detail of these, and how they really tried to make them look like the old oil painting backgrounds that you'd see in old cartoons. Man, they were really dedicated to that old 1920s style, weren't they? I hope you have all come to understand and appreciate all the time and effort that is put into the creation of our favorite games and shows, from the initial concept designs all the way to the implications of the final ones. A lot of time and effort is put into these creations. And hey, if you saw any art books in this video that you might be interested in, don't forget to pester your parents to get them for you for Christmas, because trust me, they'll cave eventually. And with new games and shows coming out left and right these days, the future looks brighter than ever for these art books, and I personally can't wait for some more to come out. Please, please let it be the Mario movie art book. I want it so bad! I want to wish you all a very Merry Christmas, and thank you all for a wonderful first year on YouTube. But don't worry, there's way more content coming on the way.